Chapter 1. The Riches of England. In 1466, a Bohemian nobleman, Gabriel Tetzel, visited England and described it as a little sea-girt garden. The Italian scholar, Polidore Vergil, writing at the end of the 15th century, was impressed by the country's delectable valleys, pleasant undulating hills, agreeable woods, extensive meadows, lands in cultivation, and the great plenty of water springing everywhere. It is truly a beautiful thing to behold 1,000 or 2,000 tame swans upon the river Thames. The riches of England are greater than those of any other country in Europe. There is no small innkeeper, however poor and humble he may be, who does not serve his table with silver dishes and drinking cups. England, wrote Piero da Monte, papal envoy to the court of Henry VI, was a very wealthy region, abounding in gold and silver and many precious things, full of pleasures and delights. Much of the land was then covered by forest and woodland. Flocks of sheep were to be seen everywhere, for the prestigious wool trade was the lifeblood of the kingdom. Cattle, too, were much in evidence, as were herds of deer. Arable land was often still divided into the open strips typical of feudal farming. But in many places there were abandoned villages, fallen into decay around ruined churches. The Warwickshire antiquarian John Rouse speaks of the modern destruction of villages being a national danger. Many villages had disappeared after a large proportion of their inhabitants had died in the great epidemic of plague known as the Black Death of 1348-49. This depopulated some villages and left others with too few inhabitants to cultivate the land. Those who remained were often able to negotiate cash wages in return for their labour, and sometimes to exploit the social mobility that this new development gave them by moving elsewhere. Other villages had been swallowed up by farmers and landowners enclosing land that had formerly been common with hedges and fences, so as to provide grazing for wool-producing sheep. There were 10,000 townships in England, but nearly all were the size of many modern villages. London was by far the largest city. Around 60,000 to 75,000 people lived there. York, the second most important city, had 15,000 inhabitants. Lesser towns perhaps 6,000 at most. Most towns and cities were bounded by the confines of their walls and nestled in a rural environment. Trade centred on them, and it was controlled by merchant guilds. There was a network of roads linking towns and villages, but few minor roads. The upkeep of roads was generally the responsibility of local landowners, but they were often less than conscientious. In many parts of England, travellers were obliged to hire local guides to see them to their destination, and roads were often rendered impassable by rain and mud. Contemporary records indicate that the climate was colder and wetter than it is now. By 1485, England had a population of between 750,000 and 3 million. Estimates vary, because the only available sources are the poll tax returns of 1381 and parliamentary records dated 1523 to 24. What is certain, however, is that England's population was shrinking during the 15th century, and also that many people moved to the great woolcloth producing areas in Yorkshire, East Anglia, and the West Country. About 9/10 of the population worked on the land. Venetian visitors noted how few people inhabited the countryside, and commented that the population of the realm did not appear to bear any proportion.